All right, it's time for the question that's on everybody's mind since they first pushed play on this episode. How the hell does Kylo Ren know how to use force healing? Here we go. So, Rey utilizes a new force power in The Rise of Skywalker, and we're calling it force healing. A long forgotten power in which a Jedi can use the Force to heal another by transferring some of their own life energy over to the wounded. While it's used by mainly Rey to heal both the sandworm and also Kylo after their duel at the end of the movie, or I'm sorry, on the Death Star wreckage. Kylo Ren also uses this power to bring Rey back to life at the end of the movie. But how did Kylo learn to use this power? So there's two issues with this. Both have weight in what made it so controversial, as it introduces discrepancies in past Star Wars movies. So the first one is that Rey is able to force heal when other high-ranking Jedi of the past seem to have had no knowledge of this power. And it's actually the power that Anakin was searching for in this time period of the prequels to be able to help save Padme. The second issue is that she learned this power from the old Jedi texts. Did the Jedi never read the text? Is it just a dark side force power exclusive? I don't know. So that's what has been bugging people the most, right? Is that how come Rey is the first we've seen in the Star Wars movies to be able to use this power? Of course, Baby Yoda, he has used it, yes, but we're going to get into that later. But specifically right now, we're talking about The Rise of Skywalker. And how Rey is able to use it because she read the Jedi texts, okay? Yoda has apparently read the Jedi texts, or we don't know. He asks Luke, has he ever read them? And Luke said no. And he said page turners that were not. So there's a chance that all of the Jedi completely ignored these books and just studied whatever the hell they thought was the right way to educate themselves in the Force. So it's very, very strange that it always existed, as Episode 9 clearly states. But the fact that no one has ever used it or bothered to educate themselves on the matter. So that's why I've come up with the idea that it was a dark side force power exclusive. You know, obviously, Plagueis knew this power, and he, so is said, taught Sidious this power. And Sidious, therefore, could have possibly used it to create Anakin Skywalker in Shmi. That's the theory, anyway. That's what I believe, and it could be what you believe, and I don't care. whatever makes sense in your head. But the point I'm getting at here is that this is why it's so unknowns to the community as to how Kylo Ren knew about this Force healing power. So, it's simple. The Force dyad. Within the Star Wars canon, a Force dyad is defined as when two Force-sensitive individuals establish such a strong Force bond that they are one within the Force, despite being two different entities. It gets better, trust me. So because their bond is so powerful, it allows those individuals to be both physically and mentally interlinked across space and time, as we've seen in both The Last Jedi and in The Rise of Skywalker. And since their Force dyad connection links both of their minds, it's possible that Kylo Ren was able to access Rey's knowledge of the Force healing. Even though Kylo has never read the Jedi text personally, it's possible that their mental link through the Force bestowed Rey's own knowledge upon him. Examples I can give you to have this make sense is in The Force Awakens, we saw the first time that their minds interlocked when Rey was being interrogated by Kylo. And If you remember, he puts his hand up to her head and he's like, "Don't be afraid, I see it too." That could have been the first time that they interlinked with each other. Even though Snoke said in episode 8 that he's the one that bridged their minds, he probably bridged it, but bridging it wouldn't have been possible if they weren't already a dyad in the Force. And there's so much more we could talk about on this dyad subject, such as why those specific two characters? Why were they the dyad? It seems kind of coincidental, doesn't it? Well, it could be that they were the only two Force-sensitive beings during this time period. So a dyad needed to be created, and since they were the only two using the Force to that caliber, then they were the ones that were chosen to be the Force dyad. So this is my poor theory to judge how Kylo Ren was supposed to know this power, is that in that time, when he was holding her, her mind was still technically on. Or right before then, because of the dyad connection, he was able to search her thoughts and find this Force heal, and then clearly he was able to use it on her. But even a better example is that when she healed him on the wreckage of the Death Star is when he knew that she knew this ability. So because he knew the ability, he was able to harness it for himself at the end of the movie to fix her, even though he didn't have to study it. Now, there is a further explanation to this possibility, and that is meditation. Meditation is the key to Force healing. It's the clarity of the mind and the self, which Ben Solo attains by the end of The Rise of Skywalker. Now, notice I emphasize Ben Solo, okay? We'll get back to that in a second, but I told you I'd bring up Baby Yoda again. So Baby Yoda, this is the only other superliminal example of Force healing being used. Superliminal is the opposite of subliminal, so it was more in your face. And Baby Yoda, I forget which episode it is, but he heals Greef Karga's wound in the Mandalorian TV show. Now, since Baby Yoda has the appearance and the mentality of an infant, despite him being 50 years old, he clearly hasn't studied the Jedi texts that Rey herself read, and yet he seems to almost Force heal innately. Now, again, Ben Solo can do this because he is reborn to the light side of the Force at the end of the movie when he kills off Kylo Ren, which some can say was also influenced by Leia, of course, not shadowing that at all. But what's interesting about the end of this movie is that Kylo Ren is gone. Ben Solo is reborn. Therefore, he has the how do you say, a symbolism of that mentality of an infant, which is to be pure, to be innocent. And therefore, he is able to, get rid of any corruptness in his mind and just focus on meditating. And because he was able to be at one with himself and his mind, he was able to meditate and harness that energy that he knew Rey had, which was Force healing. But I think he could only have used this on his dyad counterpart, Rey. If he had tried to use this on anybody else, I don't think it could have worked because he didn't study it. But because he has that connection with Rey, he's able to reciprocate it right back to her. It could have been the life that she gave him that was just given right back to her. So it's not technically he's giving up his own Force power, his own Force life energy, but he's giving back what Rey gave to him just a few hours ago, if that makes any sense. Because Kylo Ren's dead. Ben Solo's reborn. That life that is Ben Solo at the end of this movie, I believe, is what is left of Rey's life energy. And when he gives it right back to Rey at the end, then he's gone. He's completely gone. He gave up what was left of him, which was originally Rey's, and then he fades into the light. Now, there's also two other examples of Force healing in the Star Wars universe. Remember, I said that Baby Yoda and Rey are the only two superluminal examples of Force healing being used. There are two other examples. They are subliminal and they are opinionated. This could not be true, but it's just something to consider when looking back at these movies. So check this out. I think two other Jedi Siths, whatever, Force-sensitive people have been able to use Force healing in the past, and we've seen them in the Skywalker saga. We're going to start back with the original Star Wars, A New Hope. If you remember the scene where Luke Skywalker is attacked by the Sand People, and R2 goes into hiding, C-3PO's having a mental breakdown, and then Obi-Wan appears. And he kneels down by Luke, and the first thing he does is he puts his hand on his head. Shortly thereafter, Luke is able to wake up. Now, it doesn't seem like much. It could be that he was just checking, a pulse, or checking to see if he had a fever, but why his forehead, right? It raises a question. Could it be that he was passing on some Force energy to him so that he could wake up quicker? Or maybe he was damn near close to dying. I don't know, but that's the theory. Evidence to back this up is we see this return again in a later installment of the saga, and that is in Revenge of the Sith. Now we're going to talk about Anakin when he's fighting Obi-Wan on Mustafar. Gets his limbs chopped up like chop suey by Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan leaves, Palpatine comes in, and he sees Anakin on the floor, tells the clones to go get help, and he goes down. He also kneels down beside Anakin. And what does he do? Puts his hand on his forehead and grabs his temples, just as Obi-Wan did to Luke in A New Hope. And then thereafter, Anakin seems to be alive and make it to the medical bay, still conscious. So that could also mean that Luke was almost dead in A New Hope. But this is the theory. And the time spent between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope was Obi-Wan Kenobi trying to figure out how Anakin survived the burn, the limbs being chopped off, everything, and turn into Darth Vader. And the only theory was he had some Force energy passed into him. By who? Well, none other than the Emperor himself. So Obi-Wan spent this time not only learning to communicate with the dead, Qui-Gon Jinn, and learning how to become one with the afterlife, but he also used this time to study how to pass on Force energy, and he passed that on to Luke. That could also explain how he became so open to the idea of the Force, and how he was able to suddenly just connect with it like that, and how he was able to become so skillful so quickly, as Obi-Wan passed on some of his knowledge and experience, and I'm going to say it, midichlorians, onto Luke Skywalker. So that's my poor hypothesis as to elaborate on my explanation on how Kylo Ren knew how to Force heal Rey, or knew what the Force healing power was.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first.